Zara, can we start now? Should we?
Yes, I think just maybe wait for 1 or 2 minutes and then we can start. Perhaps you
Okay.
could. So we have lots of attendees joining in.
Adil, we can start.
Okay, sounds good. So, hello everyone. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to moderate this session number 8 for Global 2024, which focuses on the question around state capability and the key question: how can the civil service in Pakistan drive evidence-led decision making in times of uncertainty? I welcome everyone to this session. We have the full panel on with us. We have esteemed panelists who are experts in their respective fields from research, policy, and practice. And in combination, they have decades of experience. Today, we will be depending on them and talking to them and trying to understand this question. And they will be bringing their insights to bear on this question, that how can civil service inform policy making in Pakistan using evidence? So this is a tough question, some question that keeps coming up. Before I take the opportunity to introduce my panelists, my esteemed panelists, I will take a quick couple of minutes to say a few words in order to put the discussion into its proper perspective to sort of frame the discussion. As economists, when technology advancement was happening by leaps and bounds, there was this hope that sooner rather than later, the developing countries will catch up with developed world. That the disparity between the developed countries and the developing countries will start to decrease with every passing year. Unfortunately, that hope has not materialized. If anything, that disparity is becoming worse and worse. So this is a sort of puzzle that we're trying to solve. Why do certain countries continue to develop at a faster pace while other countries are still feeling it very hard to catch up? So the way I see this, and this is a very useful framework to try to unpack this problem, is by using the analogy that Ricardo Hausmann of Harvard Kennedy School uses about understanding technology. So he says that technology is not just tools or the recipes, but it also involves the know-how. What he says that technology goes beyond just tools and recipes or the blueprints of how to use those technical tools. And that is what really makes the difference. So if you take the analogy of Scrabble, in Scrabble, you can make different words using letters, and letters can be vowels and consonants. So consider technical tools, technology tools, and technical expertise or blueprints or recipes as consonants. And states can acquire these two parts of technology by using foreign direct investment, by bringing in expertise, by educating their people. But the third part is the most tricky one, and which is very difficult to emulate for the developing countries. So these are the wobbles. So he says that that countries can import consonants, which is technology, but they have to bring the vowels in-house. They have to produce vowels in-house. These are the things like state structure, state institutions, state capacity. And if you want a country to develop economically, it's not enough just to have technology, technical tools, and technical know-how. but you also have to have strong state institutions that can mediate, moderate, and regulate the relations between different private sector actors or other private sector entities. So this is where our discussion is. This is the context for our discussion. Now, within the state institutions, civil service is one of the most important components of state institutions, and we cannot hope to have a strong bureaucracy if it cannot take decisions in an evidence-based way, using evidence. So you might say that it is quite a stretch from using technology and going to civil service and saying that by using evidence, civil servants can solve a country's problems. I understand the problem is quite complex, but if we can break down the problem into its component parts, into its smaller units, and try to solve them, maybe we can come up with an idea of how to reform civil service and how to help it not only reform its service delivery, its efficiency, but also to become an engine of growth and try to provide an enabling environment for the private sector actors. So this is the context where we are having this discussion today. And with this framework, with this context and framing, I would like to introduce my esteemed panelists for today's session. And now I would like to read from my notes because I don't want to make any mistakes. So first of all, we have Dr. Adnan Qadir Khan. Dr. Adnan is a professor in practice at London School of Economics with a PhD in economics from Queen's University, Kingston, Canada, and an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School. Adnan has had a stellar career as a civil servant and later as an academic and researcher. He stood first in CSS exam in 1995 and joined the Pakistan Administrative Services. He teaches at LSE, has taught at Harvard Kennedy School and at National School of Public Policy in Pakistan. His research focuses on building state capacity, incentivizing civil servants for performance, taxation in developing countries, the designing of social protections programs for the ultra-poor, and a host of other areas. This is not by any means an exhaustive list of his research output. So we are thrilled to have Dr. Adnan in this session. I move to my second panelist, Hamid Yaqub Sheikh Saab. Hamid Yaqub is heading FCDO funded right now and its business process reform program, which aims to enhance government's revenue and improve investment climate. Previously, he has served as Secretary Livestock, Punjab, Special Secretary Finance Department, Punjab, Chief Economist Planning and Development Board, and Mr. Hamid Yaqub Sheikh also led the DFID-funded policy and governance program titled Sub-National Governance Program. He's an officer of Pakistan Administrative Services, like Adnan, and he has a blend of public and development sector experience spanning over 25 years. He did his master's in development studies from SOAS, United Kingdom, and completed his MBA from the Institute of Business Administration, Karachi. Hamid Saab, I welcome you to this panel. And Madam Iram Bukhari is a bureaucrat from the Pakistan Administrative Services with an experience of more than 3 decades. She created Women Development Department in Punjab as founding secretary and also established Office of Ombudswoman for protecting women against harassment at the workplace. She amended and initiated 100 new laws and rules in Punjab to safeguard women's social, financial, and civil rights. She has represented Pakistan at the UN in New York and at other international forums as well. Iram Bukhari has also served as Secretary in Industries, Higher Education, and School Education Department. In 2020, she became the first female civil servant to be assigned the portfolio of Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Punjab. Iram is currently serving as Additional Secretary to the President of Pakistan. Her area of work encompasses 35 ministries and entities, including Foreign Affairs, National Security, Finance, Defense, IT, Commerce, and Economic Affairs. So with this, I move to the part where we talk to our panelists, invite their insights. So the way we have structured this session is that we will talk to our esteemed panelists in the beginning and try to understand the framework in which evidence-based decision-making in policy formulation and implementation environment can happen, whether there are some good practices, whether we can come up with a checklist of sorts to understand when an evidence-based decision-making policy can happen with a degree of success. And then we will go individually to each one of our panelists and try to understand this framework with the help of their own success stories from their careers. So with this, I request Adnan, Hamid Saab, and Iram to throw some light one by one on the question of how can civil service in Pakistan use evidence in policy formulation? What are the barriers to this? What are the low-hanging fruits? What are the policy frameworks? What are the various pitfalls that we should avoid if we are aiming at having an evidence-friendly environment in civil service in Pakistan? So over to my panelists, Dr. Adnan Saab, if you can share your thoughts first.
Thank you, Adil and Sab, and for the invitation. Pleasure to be here. So my co-panelists, Hamid Saab and Madam Iram, have far more experience of the civil services in Pakistan. So I'll leave it to them to make specific comments about the environment in the civil service in Pakistan. I will suggest just take a step back and say a few words about what I see as the enablers and drivers of more effective evidence-informed decision-making, policy-making, in not just in Pakistan, but in different countries. And I'll focus on two things. So one is going back and stepping back beyond civil services. What is critical for effective decision-making is structure, systems, incentives, interface with politics, because both the ideas and the authorization for policy reforms come from political interface, from the overall environment, from the structure and the systems that are put in place. That also means creating an accountability and responsiveness structure for not only designing the right policies ex ante, but also thinking about and measuring, monitoring outcomes, and creating accountability structures for outcomes and impact. That also means having a system with the appropriate role of bureaucracy that focuses on the functions that are best performed by bureaucracy. But that also means not having an overreach in not going into functions that are best performed by, say, the private sector, markets, and other players. That also means focusing on, you mentioned civil servants, at the right level. So whether it's decisions should be taken at the federal level, provincial level, there are lots of decisions that should be taken at the local level. So what is the right level of decision making, and what is the right actor who should be taking those decisions? I think all of those questions about structure, systems, and the incentives of players are front and center when it comes to different environments that create the right enabling environment for evidence-informed policy making. The second enabler and driver is, and the key question there is, evidence-informed decision making and policy making is a process. It's not a product or an event. In other words, it's not a one-shot transaction. So once you decide on something and then so in other words, like what is important is to have a process and capabilities built around that process that constantly provide rigorous challenge function for policies, designing policies, but also for updating policies and for active learning and for matching capacity of the state and other actors in the state environment with the policies that need to be implemented. That also means creating an environment where good evidence is not generated one time, but is regularly generated, updated, and where it is actually used for decisions and policies and for updating government structures. In other words, the best environment would be actually using decisions and policies which are evidence-led, which are based on analytical frameworks. And not all of them will work, but also a system of separating, sifting the good from the bad, what works, what doesn't work, and updating and shifting over time. This also means having an ecosystem where there are multiple players with the capacity and incentive that drive this process. those actors could be actors in the political sphere. Those actors are also in the civil service sphere. Those actors are also those who will be generating this process of evidence, and that could be either think tanks and research centers. We have SUB here, but one could think of many others in the Pakistani environment. One could also think of academia, and also of other players that fulfill some function within this ecosystem. So having this ecosystem, and ideally which is locally led, internationally connected, but locally led. So it's not isolated from the rest of the world, but it's locally led, that these are local nodes of evidence generation and connection with policymakers. And this is far more important because of the challenges that we are now facing require a very different response from the more or less stable, certain environment that used to be the feature of our policy making in the past. So think COVID, think climate change, think of many other areas where the key challenge is, do we have the evidence and the actors who are inclined to generate and act on that evidence, and who can adapt to future challenges that are marked by radical uncertainty. So I mentioned COVID and climate change as being example. The world is becoming more and more of that type, where the challenges are marked by more and more uncertainty. And partly because we are so connected to the rest of the world that whatever happens in one country or global context also affects us. Everyone in different parts of the world. So having that innovation, capacity for innovation is a key to this process. So in short, I think what this means is the focus on structures, systems, political interface, but also an ecosystem for evidence generation, use, updation, where there are also different nodes and different actors. And in other words, thinking of the system and not just individuals. And I'll lead to my co-panelists to think about this. My own take on the environment in Pakistan is, while there are individual bits, while there are great individual examples of either people who are champions of this process and maybe projects and programs and specific policies, and other actors outside government, it's not all firing up. It's not there's still a long way to perhaps to go in terms of creating an ecosystem where it's not just dependent on particular individuals and champions of reform, but it's done on an ongoing basis, done on as a part of that ecosystem. My impression is there is still some way to go, and my colleagues hopefully will be in a position to do. And one way of creating that ecosystem is civil services around the world and bureaucracies around the world are distinguished not just by their capacity, by their structures and systems, but also by their ability to work with others. In other words, sometimes you don't need to make evidence yourself. You also can buy evidence from outside by collaborating with other actors who are better positioned, whether those are academia, whether those are think tanks, research centers, and others. So, in other words, having the nous and having both the capacity but also the ability to think through the ecosystem and to work with other actors who provide functions which are complementary, which strengthen the ecosystem. So let me stop here. Thank you again for the invitation. I'm keen.
Thank you. This was so insightful as always. It guides us into new areas and tries to and makes us think about the problem from different perspectives. So with this, I go to Hamid Saab. Hamid Saab, before you share your thoughts, I will just start with a question for you. You can answer this question as you go along. I don't want to restrict your thought process, but while you're responding, like Adnan said, that innovation and quick adaptation in civil service in an increasingly uncertain, unstable environment is the key to go, and stability is the thing of the past. So an important thing to keep in mind that working in civil service, there is the culture is such that innovation and experimentation is not encouraged. So how can we encourage experimentation and innovation in a low risk environment, in controlled environment where it can lead up to more examples that others can emulate? So I would like you to address this question right now or whenever during the course of the discussion. So with this, I invite you to share your valuable thoughts and insights.
Thank you, Adil, for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. And
Same here.
it was a pleasure to listen to Adnan, and thank you for laying out the framework and also highlighting some of the challenges that government structures face. I think there is very little that he's left for me to add. I'll just sort of repeat some of what he said and perhaps try to respond to your question as well. There is, I agree with Anand, there is a long way to go. And probably civil service in maybe heydays had very robust monitoring and evaluation and the learning loop, but it's certainly broken now. There are bits and pieces. There are very shining examples here and there, but generally I agree with Adnan that the system is broken, and there are reasons for that, which Adnan has very eloquently mentioned. So before I sort of dwell on that, I'll like to point out some of the shining examples, the recent example. I think the best example, which also Adnan also referred to, was the response that government as a whole, federal and provincial, responded to the COVID epidemic. I think the way the institutions came together, different parts of the institutions, the military, the civil service, the political parties, the governments, they came together to respond to the challenge. And most of it was, nobody in the world knew how to deal with it. And it was learning by doing. And even the research houses, many economists and data scientists, they came together and pooled resources. And Pakistan in general, came out of it relatively better than most of the world. And if if you are familiar with the way this was handled, so it's very, very evidence-based. Data was coming in from different parts of the country, from different institutions, and based on that, the isolation areas were being isolated, and the response was on both on the health side, on the administration side, on the economic stimulus, on provision of subsistence allowance through BIS, etc. All of it was handled very, very nicely. I think this is one, and this also follows from the work that Government of Punjab did when it handled dengue. Again, that was something where the number of deaths could have been much higher than they actually were. There's still substantial number, but it could have been higher. So there are examples. This is just one example where this was possible. And so there are other areas as well. In revenue, if you while we agree that generally this whole the learning and evidence-based decision making is not entirely absent. The entire field work, for example, the revenue collection work, is completely data-driven. So, whether it's at the provincial level, at the district administration level, or at the FBR level, they play with the data. They learn from the data and make their decisions according to it. It's not ideal. It certainly, there's much more that can be done, but there is a practice of using evidence in decision making. Now, why is this not being done, and why it's not happening? I think Nan pointed out very eloquently that the accountability structures, are perhaps not there, and they, what it actually means is that, just to give you an example from our own project, this project has been in the field for about 2 years, and in this 2 years, we have there've been 4 governments, PTI, PDM, caretaker, and now this dispensation. They've been, I think, they've been 5 finance ministers. There've been 3 chairman FBR, 6 secretaries of Ministry of Industry and Production. So if you look at the tenure, that the time they have for evidence-based decision making, it's actually something which we need to think about. So unless we have, and I've been part of the budget making process both at the provincial level and at the federal level, and I think the highest forum and the most formal government process is the presentation of the budget, and again the approval of the budget. That is where the representative of the people have the chance to hold the government accountable. How much the representatives, MNAs and MPs hold the government accountable is very well known. And that sort of trickles down below, because this is not happening at the top. People down below is also starting to lose it as a practice, and except obviously the example that we know of. The other part is that government is very good in collecting data. The Bureau of Statistics, both at the federal level and at the provincial level, they are very good at collecting lots and lots of data. But there's very little on the analysis. So wherever you see some analysis coming in, you also start to see decision making being influenced. And I'd like to mention the work, for example, being done by Bela Jameen. Now, this is an independent work on the status of education. And this report is published, with regular frequency. And the numbers are being now, as Nan said, it's not necessary the government does it itself. It can lean on others as well. So now these numbers are being used by all governments, especially in Punjab, for education, primary and secondary education. Similarly, I now see that Tabat Lab, for example, brings up papers and discussions on evidence. These are very helpful, but they're very few. They need for several more. You mentioned one of the projects, the Sub-National Governance Project, where we introduced a small innovation. And so basically the innovation was that we launched Citizens Budget. The idea really was that the budget makes no sense to common people. Not even people who have dealt with budgets for a long time. And these are big pile of books nobody reads about. So we wanted to present that information in a manner that layman could also relate to. It was a small booklet with infographics and clear, so basically showing a link between inputs and outputs and the likely direction of travel for the outcomes. That was adopted. People thought that Chief Minister would not like that. It was taken up, immediately. So it was used everywhere. In one of my later roles, Ministry of Finance publishes Economic Survey of Pakistan. Again, there's tons of data there. We introduced a small booklet of infographics, basically the same information in a concise manner, in a more readable manner, and it was launched as highlights of the Economic Survey of Pakistan. Again, it's a small booklet of infographics, not more than 15 pages. This is being used in by every ministry. We see people, copies of that lying around, which means that people are starting to use that data. So I think one challenge that we need to also keep in mind, and maybe find a role for actors both in government and outside, is that how to make that evidence available for decision making, and perhaps that would also help make people both in the civil service, on the political side, accountable for the outcome. I'll stop here, and I'll come back to any other questions if you have.
Thank you, Hamid Saab. I have a question for Adnan, but I'll come to that later. When you say that making evidence available for policymakers, so there's a little challenge that sometimes the researchers, their timeline or their horizon is a little broader, and it takes longer to produce the evidence, or the quality of evidence that they are comfortable pushing forward with the policymakers. But policymakers need very quick decision making. Their decision, the window in which they have to make decisions, it doesn't allow for that longer horizon. So we can come back to that with Adnan and see how he can guide us, how he thinks about this problem. I'll now request Madam Iram, and again, like I started with Hamid Saab, I will start with a question which you are totally liberty to answer now, later on during the discussion, during when you're talking about the success stories from your career, about innovation and accountability. So accountability can be created in small silos, and it can be started as an initiative for a year or two. But what happens is that after a certain timeline, there are actors who defeat the purpose of that accountability, and that accountability is not institutionalized. I have some examples, but I would like you to share how can we create accountability for our officials in various ministries and departments, so that it is part of the process. It is not something that people can manipulate or sort of defeat through their own ways and methods. So with this question, I request you to start with your insights, and you can answer this now or later on, as I said. Please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adil. Before I come to your question, 2 points that I picked up, one from Dr. Adnan, when he said that there has to be this factor of political buy-in whenever we're talking about reforms and we're talking about how to innovate or transform the environment within the public sector, there has to be a political buy-in. And the other question that I noted from when Hamid was speaking, that the government, indeed, I agree with both Dr. Adnan and Hamid, that yes, the political buy-in is an essential ingredient and an essential condition for any kind of reform to take place in this public sector. And also, I agree with Hamid when he says that the government already collects data. The government collects big data, actually. So perhaps when we feel that despite the collection of big data, how come it is not being used to make better decisions? How come it is not being used to improve the service delivery and to improve the lives of citizens in this country? So the question, which is on the title of today's webinar, it says, can the civil service in Pakistan drive evidence-led decision-making in times of uncertainty? A simple answer to this question is yes. The civil service in Pakistan can drive evidence-led decision-making in times of uncertainty. However, having said that, after that, yes, there are conditions that have to be met in order to let the civil service, or to allow the civil service to drive the evidence-led decision making. And the political buy-in, in my personal experience, I've always felt that the credibility and big data collection and analysis, that's always helpful for political buy-in. If there is enough data which has been analyzed and which is presented at the proper forums, then we do find that the political lead and decision makers on the executive side of this state, they do tend to agree when there is enough evidence placed before them in front of committees, in the cabinet committees, in the cabinet itself, in different committees, at different fora that the government uses for decision making. So since the data collection is already there, I'd like to just give you two very specific, quickly, two examples of how the existing data in my own experience on two different occasions has actually led to a better decision making, which is also established through the current setup, the current governmental organization and institutional mechanism where it has been entrenched and very well entrenched. The first example is that of the schools education department. So I happened to lead the school education department as its secretary. And when I took charge, during my initial briefings, I was told that just a few months before my arrival, the schools education department, with the help of the Punjab Information Technology Board, the PITB, they had started a web-based transfer system, which was known as e-transfers, electronic transfers, right? So transfers in school education department are a big deal. And it is estimated that a lot of money changes hands when teachers desirous of getting themselves transferred from one station to another station. It involves a lot of corrupt practices at different levels. And the idea in 2019, when this was launched, before my arrival as the secretary in school education, the idea was to minimize corruption and to bring in transparency so that every year after the exam results are announced, because obviously teachers are not transferred before the exams are being conducted. So once the exams are over, it's an exercise that happens every year, and teachers are then there are certain parameters that are set, and teachers are allowed to apply for transfers. And before 2019, the teachers would actually come to the secretariat. They would run after political elected representatives from their own villages, from the union council, from their tehsils, and running from pillar to post, asking that they should get transferred, right? Now, we're talking about not a few thousand teachers in the Punjab. So the Punjab has an estimated number of 600,000 employees, the education department alone. The schools education department has 400,000 teaching staff and almost 200,000 non-teaching staff, which makes a total of 600,000 people. So imagine hundreds and thousands of men and women, employees of the education department, seeking transfers, and the kind of the environment in which all these transfers are taking place. Now, what happened in 2019, when I took charge and I got the briefings, I saw that there was enough data to convince me. I was convinced that this transparency through online web portals was the way to go forward, right? So I was told that since the start, even today, when I checked with the latest data, since 2019, 227,000 applications by teachers have been processed online with 100% transparency, right? So that data at the time when I took charge, that led me to this, we're talking about an enabling environment and conditions that lead the bureaucracy to make evidence-based decisions. So this condition of big data and its credibility, because those are the two key factors that I consider. If there's data and I'm convinced about the credibility, if there's enough transparency, I'm going to make decisions about that, right? So I was able to convince my minister of the time and also the chief executive of the province of the time that we would like to now extend this facility on the web portal of the school education department to include e-leaves for all kinds of teaching and non-teaching staff, right? So I do not know if the audience or the panelists are aware of this fact that getting leaves approved is another thing that is a lot of corruption is involved in that as well, because there are different authorities for approving leave, and at each level there is rent seeking, there are hurdles, there are people have to, even if cash is not paid, then many times favors have to be asked for and favors are given. So that the transfer data encouraged me, and I developed another dashboard for e-leaves. And when I launched it with much fanfare, within 1 week of its launch, 100,000 employees of the education department had applied for e-leave, including earned leave, including medical leave, including Hajj leave, all kinds of leave that are admissible. And today, when I checked the data for this webinar, I thought I would come up with latest figures. So today I was told that 4.2 million applications of leave have been processed on that dashboard till today, right? So that is something that kind of builds my confidence in the fact that something like this can be done in the public sector also. This is one experience that I have seen myself and which is available for all to see.
Yeah,
Now,
and just to add to the benefit of our audience, madam, just to
Yes.
not interrupting, but just saying that for the audience, it is crucial to understand that after the armed forces, school education department in Punjab is the largest employer. And ma'am, you can, I think, share the exact numbers of how big is the workforce and how big
That
is
is-
this problem of simple leave management and transfer management. And how not having an automated system can create so many problems at every level.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Indeed, after the Pakistan Army, the School Education Department of the Punjab has the second largest HR, which is almost 600,000 employees. And one angle that was particularly, I was very happy to be launching this. And today, when it has reached almost 4.2 million cases, which are in the data bank and which are transparently being handled, the fact that for women employees in the government, in the public sector, the cases for leave approval sometimes also endanger them, because they can sometimes be asked to come up with undue favors, and sometimes they're also harassed. So when women are not asked to go and visit different offices to get their long leaves approved, and they can do it through their cell phones, I am, being an ex-secretary and founding secretary of the Women Development Department, I am also happy that it saves women from a lot of exploitation. And this is one thing that needs to be the gender as a cross-cutting theme. All decision-making in our country should be looking at the gender angle as well. So this example is particularly of interest to me, because it's not only that it is eliminating corruption in a particular service delivery for the HR, but it's also leading to a safer environment, and it's saving women from harassment, undue harassment. So about your the question, initially when you were mentioning about innovation and about resistance, and how the interest groups would eventually want to block some kind of a new development which might be good for a certain part of society but may not be working well for a particular interest group. So I would like to give another example. Now, this is another, not a textbook case, but this is from real life. When I was Additional Chief Secretary Punjab, so that was the time when there was obviously every year in Ramzan, we all know, those who live in Pakistan, every year in Ramzan, there is some kind of an issue about either sugar availability or wheat availability or something discounting because somehow our traders tend to hoard more during the holy month. For the other 11 months, we're okay, but so whenever the announcement for the moon sighting is made in Ramzan, somehow everybody runs and starts, thinking of making more profits. So there was this in the beginning, because this was a time of crisis, and every day there was a meeting that was being chaired by the Prime Minister of that time, in which all the provinces were participating, and the federal government concerned ministries were participating too. And we were looking at price checking particularly, because there is a mechanism in Pakistan where magistrates go to different stores and shops, and they go and make sure that things are being sold at the fixed prices that have been fixed by the district administration of each district, right? So when we were dealing with that, we thought of a deep look into the data. We realized that there was no evidence as such, except the written reports that we were getting. And every district was sending us reports that so many officers in a particular day went and visited so many shops, and that they find so many people, and this was the amount. And these reports used to come on a daily basis. They still do. It's a routine thing. It's an SOP in the governments, in all the provincial governments. It happens in ICT also, but in the Punjab, because Punjab is almost as big as a country itself, right? So in the Punjab, obviously the numbers are huge, and the sheer the huge amounts that are involved, right? So and these results that the stuff, the reports that are sent every day to the secretariat in Lahore throughout from every tehsil and every district of the Punjab, these reports are compiled and then shared with the federal government. So we noticed that during some of our analytical meetings, we noticed that some of the data did not sound as if it was being prepared on a daily basis, right? We felt that the trends and the big data analysis, you see, that will show you the trends, and the trends were, there were question marks. So I thought of a solution, an innovative solution to this issue, and discussed it with my boss, the chief secretary of that time. And then we were able to develop a mobile app, which is called the Karkardagi app. And what we did in the app was that all the data about all the shops in the Punjab that was available with the industries and the Food Authority and many other agencies that work on foodstuffs, we got all of that stored into our app, right, as drop-down menus. And we asked all our officers in the field, they were given Android phones, and they were asked that anytime they would go for price checking, they would turn on their location. So the moment they turned on their location, they were geotagged. And there were screens in our offices where we could see at any given point in time how many officers in the Punjab were visiting which area and which shop were they visiting. So when we started doing that, it was something that was welcomed and appreciated generally by the masses, but it also brought a lot of criticism from our officers who were getting a feeling that the government had stopped trusting them. And it became an issue in that sense that they started being vocal about it as well, saying that they have been performing their duties, and why is the government interested in geotagging them? But the interesting twist in this thing came that while we were having these, the app was launched and we started getting data, and the data started showing us definitely a trend which was very different from the one which was the pre-app time. And in one of the meetings, we have an urban unit in the Punjab. So the urban unit is also an agency of the government of Punjab, and they had been given the task initially, and for years and years since the establishment, what they used to do was they used to do a cross-check on the state of price checking in the entire province to their own machinery and through their own HR. So we realized, we were told in a meeting, the CEO of the urban unit, when he started looking at our data through the Karkardagi app, he said, I need to go back and check my data, because my data does not show what this app is showing. Because this app, it was impossible for any human to change anything in it. It was completely, you see, an online thing, which was just checking people on ground. And then he came back, and we were all shocked to hear that he said, he told the meeting, that every person on his team had been changed by him. He had transferred everyone because he felt, and he was told when he went down and said, how come my data is not matching the one from the Karkartiki app, which is the geotagged app, right? And he said that his people had been compromised. And he said this app is actually showing the 100% result on ground. And his people were in connivance with the different shopkeepers, and they were also simply sending the same reports which are coming before the app. So you see, this is a kind of a thing, like when we talk about challenges, yes, people in their comfort zone within the public sector and in the private sector also, they would be resistance. But as civil servants, when we talk about transformation, we have been trained all our lives to take up challenges and to move ahead, because the ultimate good of the people is what should be our vision, and not individuals'
Definitely.
comfort.
Definitely, ma'am. These are great examples, but it is my unpleasant duty to keep time as well. But I would say that your examples show that how automating systems can take out the discretionary authority of at various levels out of the system, and can minimize chances of corruption and rent-seeking behavior in the government departments. And the second example that you shared with us shows how accountability can be introduced in the system, and how various interest groups can try to defeat that purpose. And we have to have a strategy, backup strategy, that can make that accountability mechanism last for longer. So with this, quickly, I will move to the last part of our discussion, where we answer the questions from the audience. We have first question, which sort of combines or is similar to the question which I had in mind, that research evidence comes at a slower pace than the compulsion to make those decisions. So how can policymakers or bureaucrats or civil servants be enabled to think longer term? How can we create mechanism in the system that incentivizes long-term thinking rather than quick thinking, quick fixes, just for the next quarter or for the next 6 months or the next fiscal year? So how can we create incentives for long-term thinking? This is a question for all the panelists. I'll be happy to listen to your input on that.
Yeah, maybe the Adnan.
No, please, sir.
So I just wanted to say that for civil servants can definitely play a role, and generally policies are based on some sort of evidence. It's not that there is no evidence. It's just the how good is the analysis which goes into the policy, which is which is the real question. The real problem is that is the policy being implemented and followed in letter and spirit, and then the change in policy is based on any evidence. That is the real challenge. But there is some method in madness as far as evidence-based policy making is concerned.
Thank you. Adnan, you had a thought to share with us?
Yeah, let me say a few words by combining several questions. So Lutfullah's questions, Isha's and other questions, and then get my final response, and then listen to others. It is right that it's when we talk about use of evidence in policy making, and the barriers to it, it has less to do with the individual policymakers and individual researchers, and more to do with the incentives and the constraints that they face in the environment that they're facing. And yes, academic incentives are to publish, and that takes a longer time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that constraint cannot be overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it has been overcome in Pakistan and other contexts also by forging longer term collaborations. So longer term collaboration that focus on deeper, longer term questions that will not take a few months, that cannot be answered in the short run. But at the same time, having engagement and collaborations, which can also answer the question that policymakers face on a day-to-day basis. What should go into my budget for this year, or what should I be deciding about one policy or others? And those answers could be on the stock of knowledge that we have and not necessarily based on new research. And at some time, it's also institutional collaboration. So whereas individual researchers and others may have short-term incentives, institutions, we're talking about the LUMS, PIDE, SERP, Lahore School, other institutions, they do not necessarily face shorter-term incentives, so they can also intermediate to perform such functions. But there are similar constraints on the side of policymakers also. So Hamid mentioned like the limited tenure that many policymakers have. So that, and there's a question also about how do we incorporate longer-term thinking into this, which is a challenge when you have very, very short-term tenures and everyone is thinking about what can I do now, today. Whereas in an ideal world, it's also a question of, call it like time consistency. So tomorrow I'll be happy if someone had invested in answering these questions, but today I don't have time to invest in these. I can only focus on short-term questions. But if everyone engages in such thinking, obviously there will be no investment in longer-term questions. And we'll always have a tomorrow which is similar to today. So the answer to that question is, while focusing on shorter-term questions, which are important, which are critical, also invest some of the energy towards setting up these types of collaboration, partnership by focusing also on longer-term questions. For instance, questions that have longer-term importance, flagship policies of the government, signature projects and programs. Not everything needs to be evaluated, but if significant amount of resources are going into certain policies and they are scaled up, yes, some investment should go there. It's also about like the incentive structure facing civil servants. It's not that civil servants are risk averse by nature. It's also part of the environment where mistakes are perceived as costly. Whereas I think the right way of thinking about is to distinguish between mala fide and bona fide mistakes. Mala fide mistakes obviously need to be accounted for, but bona fide mistakes need to be celebrated in the sense like if no one is making a mistake, that means no one is innovating, no one is doing anything beyond what is usually being done. The real question is, can we design a policy environment where there is less possibility of making mistakes ex ante and ex post if certain mistakes are made? And as that criteria of success is some mistakes are made because people are innovating, not everything will succeed. How quickly are they corrected and what are the lessons being learned from those mistakes? That will be the right environment. That's the environment that we need to create. And that also means not just doing innovating at one level, not just one actor, federal level. Lutfullah's questions, yes, having multiple levels of government, having multiple governments who are able to do that, who are also able to innovate, who are maybe also able to get the best maybe capacity. Some capacities are in-house, some capacities can also be got from outside. So not just civil service, but also people, best capacities from outside. So that may ensure more and more of this. But let me stop here and create space for this.
This is great, Adnan. And thank you for combining a number of questions and answering them rather than going one by one. If any of the other panelists, Hamid Saab and Madam Iram would like to answer these questions, please, you're most welcome.
Yeah, Adil, can I just add something?
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay, so this, based on not a particular one question, but just the kind of vibe that I get from the question. So in real time, let's not forget that there are things that are sustainable in Pakistan, certain organizations that have been able to achieve sustainability and certain programs that are also sustainable. One big example is the Benazir Income Support Program, right? So started as Benazir Income Support, in the PTI's time, had a subtitle called Ehsaas Program. Now there is another PMLN and the government. The program continues to flourish in some way or the other. So that is primarily because the data set that is coming out of the program day in and day out that is so credible that no political government has been able to completely shut down the program, right? So that is actually a practical example for us to see that Benazir Income Support Program is never going to get eliminated. It might change forms. It might, any political government might come and add value to it, or maybe change the parameters. But in essential, the essentiality of the program, that is going to remain. One more example is the Punjab Rescue Service, 1122. It started from the Punjab during the chief minister was probably Parvez Ilahi at that time it started. Every successive government, whether it was the PMLN that was ruling, whether it was the PTI that was ruling, or whether it is the People's Party that is ruling, everywhere the rescue service has seen an upward trend in terms of development and expansion to underserved areas, right? And that again is based on the evidence, because there is very strong evidence available, which helps every successive government to add on to the existing service. So I just wanted to add that we all is not bleak. We do have shining examples of how the public sector has been able to deliver and how the sustainability has been ensured because of the evidence. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, most definitely. There are good examples that we can learn from, and by no means the glass is half empty. It is half full, and we have good examples to celebrate and learn from. With this, we are coming close to our session, but I would take a quick 30 seconds or so to just summarize and take the key takeaways from the discussion so far. So we learned that the stability and certainty is a thing of the past. We are living in a world where there is constant change is constant. It is in the form of climate change. It is in the form of epidemics. It is form of artificial intelligence, which is disrupting technologies everywhere, public sector, private sector, and changes everywhere. So with this background, civil service has to be very adaptable, very adaptive, adapt to the new situations and learn very quickly to stay relevant and to deliver the goods. Yes, and we should also incentivize innovation by aligning incentives of bureaucrats. They are not risk averse by nature. They are risk averse by the dictates of the system in which they have to operate, and the system can be changed or modified slightly here and there to encourage innovation. And most importantly, civil service should create that capacity not to work with others who are good at doing research and try to learn from them. It should not overstretch. It should not start doing things which it is not best equipped to do, but it can learn from other researchers, other players in the ecosystem. Hamid Saab had very good examples to share how Pakistan's civil service and armed services came together to deal with the situation in the COVID during 2020, 21, and 22. And he also shared good examples in bureaucracy elsewhere. So with these, and yes, one very good thought that Adnan was shared was that the problem of having research, having long-term horizon, which doesn't sit well with the policymakers' compulsions, is to have a research which is pre-existing, because research in many cases answers questions or tries to answer questions which are existing, which are recurring. They come, we face them every year. So we should try to not commission new research maybe, but try to make use of good research which is already available, and also collaborate with other institutions who think long-term wise. And this is how we can try to solve the problem of short-term thinking in the civil service. So these are key takeaways for me. I'm sure my participants have learned a lot from our esteemed panelists. It has been my honor to be with you in this session. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to learn from you, Dr. Adnan, Hamid Saab, Madam Iram. I especially thank all of you, especially Madam Iram, who had to come on this panel at with our strong request at such a short notice. And we are humbled by your graciousness and your the way you welcome this request of ours. So with this, I thank you once again. And hope to see you again. Hope to talk to you again, maybe in some other session, some other opportunity where we can learn from you. And looking forward to stay connected with you all. And thank you everyone for being in this session. I'm sure you have learned a lot. So this learning will continue, inshallah, in other ways and means. So take care, everyone. Thank you everyone for being
Thank
in
you.
this session.
Thank you, Adil, and Khuda Hafiz. Thank you, Adnan.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Hafiz.
Adil.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Adnan.
you.
Thank you, Adnan.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.